Today we continue our summer series on superheroes of the Bible. A characteristic I learned about superheroes is that each has a backstory that explains the circumstances by which the character acquired his or her abilities, as well as his or her motivation for becoming a superhero. Many of their stories involve tragic elements that result in the development of the hero's abilities. So you may remember that Power Girl Captain Marvel, aka Air Force Major Carol Danvers. Did you know, due to her long history in Marvel Comics, Carol Danvers has been highly regarded. She has been labeled Marvel's biggest female hero, a feminist icon, and quite possibly Marvel's mightiest Avenger. Did you know? Did you know that today's superhero, Mary Magdalene, quite possibly may be Christianity's biggest female hero? Will you pray with me, please? Loving God, the story of Mary Magdalene's search at the tomb is our narrative of turning. The conversion of resurrection faith which Mary experiences, her role as witness to the resurrection, represents the movement from grief and despair to hope and joy. The movement is made possible only by her willingness to face the darkness of the tomb and to seek the Christ of her longing with persistence and courage. Like Mary, may we be willing to face the darkness of our tombs as we seek to know who Jesus is to each of us. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts praise you this and every day. Amen. Amen. Renee's not here, but she always was asking when she's not here, what is going to be your prop? So for my sermon today, it's binoculars, all right? And so the title of my sermon is Just Keep Seeking. Just keep seeking. To use the binoculars, it brings people and objects closer. And so for the divine, we encounter now in the meaning of our seeking. The overall goal of the Gospel of John is to explain the mystery of Jesus, his divine nature and human form. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb. Even though she knew it to be empty, she couldn't stop seeking to find Jesus, or at least find out where he had gone. The angels of the tomb asked her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" challenging her to understand what it was she was really seeking. Mary replies that it is not only that Jesus has been taken away, but she did not know where he is. However, despite her desperate seeking, she doesn't actually recognize him until he calls her name. What is it about Jesus' calling of her name that brings about recognition? Does she recognize his voice, or is it the way he says her name? Is it that his call touches her in a way that causes her to recognize him? We are not told the reason, only that it is with the calling of her name that recognition comes. Mary Magdalene, the holy harlot, or that's how I heard it growing up Catholic. Mary Magdalene, the woman who loved too much, the woman who'd been a prostitute, was saved from her past by Jesus, the woman who was slightly dangerous, sexy, a penitent temptress, who had turned away from her many sins and found Jesus Christ more compelling. The penitent sinner, the reformed prostitute, has been the prevailing characterization of Mary and her part, particularly in the story of Holy Week. It's always in the context of a grateful, fallen woman, probably in love with Jesus, devoted to him and devastated by his death. There is, in fact, no clear biblical evidence of this character, Mary Magdalene, the penitent sinner. Let me say it again. There is, in fact, no clear biblical evidence for this character, Mary Magdalene, the penitent sinner. What I found in doing this sermon, I found that Magdala was a town with a reputation for bloody uprising. Incidentally, the only reference to sexual license is in a rabbinic midrash on the Book of Lamentations, where Magdala is mentioned as somewhere where adultery is practiced. The Gospel of Luke in chapter 8 says that she has 7 demons go out of her. But these are never explained. Each age has tried to explain them. Medieval theologians interpret them as the 7 deadly sins, with emphasis on lust. Martin Luther interpreted them as 7 devils. Modern theologians interpret them as convulsions, similar to the man who lived among tombs, a form of disability. Other writers of a goddess cult, contemporary with Jesus, said it had 7 steps of initiation. Author M.R. Thompson's book, Mary of Magdala, Apostle and Leader, asks 2 questions about Mary Magdalene. Was it possible that she was an apostle? And was it possible that she was an important leader in the early communities? These are different questions, and to each, she answers yes. Her memory, her story, linked with each of the 4 gospel empty tomb accounts. She's the only person, male or female, for whom this is true. Superhero, holy prophet. At the end of the book, Thomas provides a catalog of titles that have been associated with Mary Magdalene. Early church traditions awards Mary of Magdala the following titles: Apostle, because she has seen the Lord; Disciple, because she has followed the Lord; Deacon, because she has ministered to him and to his other disciples; Evangelizer, because she was sent out with the message that Jesus Christ has risen; and Leader, because the written evidence portrays her thus. The irrefutable fact is that the name of Mary of Magdala is essentially bound up with a central Christian reality: humankind's realization that resurrection has occurred. Superhero, quite possibly Christianity's biggest female hero. A reading this morning from John chapter 20, verses 11 to 18 that Bob so beautifully read, is a core text for a reclaimed understanding of Mary of Magdala. Mary is given a new role. Jesus tells her she is not to be silent. She is to speak. She is explicitly to teach her brothers by speaking of her experience. She is to be an agent of God's revelation to the world. After the departure of Peter and the beloved disciple, we find her weeping outside the tomb. Unlike them, she does not go home, but rather continues her search. Just keep seeking. Just keep seeking. It is this willingness to remain in the place of sorrow and to articulate the pain of the believing yet doubting community that finally leads her to the joy and hope of Easter. Mary Magdalene persists in her search without letting go and without disowning the pain. Through turning towards pain and death, Mary Magdalene ultimately turns toward the living one. Her physical movement towards the risen Christ is symbolic of an inner turning. It represents a transformation. In this turning, she moves from grief and longing towards the joy and hope awaiting her. In turning to face Jesus, she responds as one who is lost, searched, and finally found. Mary recognizes the beloved voice of the shepherd. She responds with the intimate term, Rabboni, expressing her love for Jesus as well as understanding of his teaching. Mary is commissioned to proclaim the resurrection to the community. I want to share a backstory now of a modern-day woman whose life you know a little bit about. Her name is Mother Teresa, or soon to be Saint Teresa, on September 4th. You know that? Amazing. She once said, "If I ever become a saint, I will surely be one of darkness. I will continually be absent from heaven to light the light of those in darkness on earth." She also said that the joy of loving Jesus comes from the joy of sharing in his sufferings. So do not allow you to be troubled or distressed, but believe in the joy of the resurrection. In all of our lives, as in the life of Jesus, the resurrection has to come. The joy of Easter has to dawn. See, taken as a kind of mission statement, these words of Mother Teresa provide a key to the understanding of her spiritual life, and indeed of her whole life. Jesus had requested, and Mother Teresa strove to be the light of God's love in the lives of those who were experiencing darkness. For her, the paradoxical and unsuspected cost of her mission was that she herself would live in terrible darkness. A misrepresented prostitute, Mary. A nun who felt lost and darkness, Mother Teresa. Superheroes of our Christian faith. In a letter to one of her spiritual directors, Mother Teresa wrote, "Now, Father, since 49 or 50, this terrible sense of loss, this untold darkness, this loneliness, this continuing longing for God, which gives me that pain deep down in my heart. Darkness is such that I really do not see. The place of God in my soul is blank. There is no God in me. When the pain of longing is so great, I just long and long for God. And then it is that I feel he does not want me. He is not there. God does not want me. Sometimes I just hear my heart cry out, my God, and nothing else comes. The torture and pain I can't explain." Some of you felt that. You felt that. My God, and nothing else comes. The torture, the suffering, the pain, we can't explain. Mother Teresa's memoirs explain that she was unable to feel his presence that she had earlier. She was afraid. What was she doing? Was she going the wrong way? No. With the help of her spiritual directors, she came to grasp that her painful inner experience was an essential part of living her mission. It was a share in the passion of Christ on the cross, with a particular emphasis on the thirst of Jesus as the mystery of his longing for the love and salvation of every human person. Eventually, she recognized her mysterious suffering. Her living of this inner experience was an integral aspect of her vocation, expression of her love for God and for his poor. Beyond providing care for the outcasts of human society, she was willing to embrace their material and spiritual suffering. She was willing to join in their state of being unwanted, unloved, uncared for, having no one. Although this intense and ongoing spiritual agony could have made her desperate, she instead radiated remarkable joy and love. She was truly a witness to hope. an apostle of love and joy, because she built her life on pure faith. We, like Mary and Mother Teresa, have had our tomb and darkness experience, haven't we? For my end, my experience has been recent. Many of you have heard that 6 weeks ago, my brother-in-law, Richard Lewis, died of a traumatic brain injury suffered from a tragic fall. His wife of 40 years, my twin sister, Joy, and her 3 daughters, Sarah, Adrian, and Jacqueline's husband, Chris, and my sister, Ann, and her husband, Michael, and dear friends, and me, were at his bedside when he took his last breath to return to the God he loved. Richard was a kind and caring man. Our family, we felt like Mary, the profound grief and pain of loss. And like Mother Teresa, the longing for God, filled with darkness. And then this past Sunday, we had a little bit of a resurrection experience. We were all together again for the christening of my grandnephew, Kelton. And then this past week, we had summer camp for my grandnephews and nieces, ranging from 2 months to 5 years old. Gavin, Tommy, Cecilia, Niev, and Keith, and Kelton. Hope and joy. Love lives on. Mary Magdalene, the apostle to the apostles, and Mother Teresa, the apostle of love and joy, just kept seeking to find who Jesus was to them. We must keep seeking. Mother Teresa, these words that I am about to read echo the backstory of her and Mary Magdalene, and maybe our backstory too. These are excerpts from a poem titled, Who Jesus is Jesus to Me. She said, Jesus is the word to be spoken. Jesus is the truth to be told. Jesus is the way to be walked. Jesus is the light to be lit. Jesus is the life to be lived. Jesus is the love to be loved. Jesus is the joy to be shared. Jesus is the sacrifice to be offered. Jesus is the peace to be given. Jesus is the bread of life to be eaten. Jesus is the hungry to be fed. Jesus is the thirsty to be satiated. Jesus is the naked to be clothed. Jesus is the homeless to be taken in. Jesus is the sick to be healed. Jesus is the lonely to be loved. Jesus is the unwanted to be wanted. Jesus is the drug addict to befriend him. Jesus is the prostitute to remove from danger and befriend. Jesus is the prisoner to be visited. Jesus is my all and all. Jesus is my everything. The fourth evangelist, John, accords Mary Magdalene 4 distinctions. 1, she is the first witness to the resurrected Jesus. 2, she is the only woman Jesus calls by name in the gospel. 3, she is commissioned to proclaim the resurrection to the disciples. And 4, she speaks in only one place and nowhere else in the Bible, as she says, I have seen the Lord. This verse stands as the only place in the Gospels where the words of a woman are recorded, the role of proclamation. And her proclamation is to the disciples, to us. May we, like Mary Magdalene, speak publicly about what we know to be true about our own experience of faith. May we, community of MCCPB, follow Mary Magdalene's life of discipleship as men and women of courage, of faith, and integrity. May we, like Mother Teresa, be an apostle of love and joy, and light the light of those in darkness. And when we have our tomb and darkness experiences, let us just keep seeking. Just keep seeking. May our movement toward Jesus be our transformation from grief and longing toward the joy and hope awaiting us. Listen. Jesus is calling our names. Amen.